Over the past 72 hours, I think that we've witnessed a textbook example of media manipulation and left wing bias in Canadian political coverage. And I am not just talking about the CTV news story, although that is the catalyst to the whole situation. For those of you who don't know, I'll explain generally what happened, and then I want to talk mostly about the reaction from lefty journalists and fake conservatives in the legacy media, because it's crazy how even though the federal conservatives and Pierre Poilievre were proven right at every step of the way, you mostly had the media attacking them for it, no matter what stage of the timeline we are in. So it all started out with the conservatives calling out CTV News for having manipulated footage of Pierre Poilievre speaking about the no confidence motion in the Liberal government and making it seem like Poilievre was bringing it forward because he opposes universal dental so much. Universal dental is still a terrible program. It's bloated, costs too much, and the Liberals have basically been manipulating metrics around it to pretend it's performing well. But obviously, Poilievre had been calling for the motion of no confidence because of the carbon tax, because the Liberals refused to scrap the consumer carbon tax that pretty much by all the polling metrics, the vast majority of Canadians want gone. Now, obviously, the media had done this in order to make it seem like Poilievre is just so against social programs, and that's why he wants to call an election. CTV News had taken an entire paragraph that Pierre Poilievre had said and picked out a few different lines in order to reconstruct a sentence that made it seem like he was saying, yes, this is why we're bringing the motion forward, right after CTV News had been talking about universal dental. This is not a mistake. You don't accidentally hit the keyboard wrong and then generate this kind of a clip. This was spliced very precisely, and it would have only taken an extra second or two in order to get the full context that this was actually about the carbon tax. Now, when Pierre Poilievre and the federal conservatives called this out in an email to their supporters as well as through press releases, there were so many people in the legacy media as well as the left-wing blogosphere who immediately mocked the conservatives. Oh, they're so sensitive. They can't handle neutral, unbiased media. They want CTV News to be putting up propaganda for them. What's wrong? And then the clips came out of what Poilievre actually said and what CTV News had done. And then you still got excuse making saying, well, that's basically what he had said. Oh, it's no different. It's just another dumb failed motion of no confidence. What he's saying isn't so important that CTV News can't condense it. And then CTV News had to come out and say, yes, we understand this is actually, this is not fair. That's not actually what you said about the no confidence vote. And then you had people on CBC and other legacy media outlets, and again, also the left-wing blogs came out and said, well, it's ridiculous for the conservatives to pretend like this is malicious. It's so paranoid. And I even want to quickly bring up this post that was made right before the finale had happened. David Musgrove, a man whose profession seems to be just being impressed with himself all day, says, this paranoid, self-pitying, enemies list Nixon bit won't age well. And it's Poilievre calling out other bad, like he was reposting an article from the National Post, one of the few mostly conservative outlets, saying that CTV News was acting in shameful fashion to their journalistic, aspirations. And David is basically saying that Pierre Poilievre is being paranoid and pretending everyone's out to get him. And then CTV News released a statement saying that, yes, we had to fire 2 employees because this error was so egregious and it was intentional. This isn't something like, again, where somebody hits the space bar when they didn't mean to, and it generated something that made Poilievre look bad. This was something where the people working on it knew what they were doing. It took them hours to accomplish, and there was no reason for the entire statement that Poilievre had made not to be included in the news segment. The Canadian news, if you watch it, is the most repetitive thing on the planet. CBC, the National, is only about an hour, and they repeat it multiple times a night. CTV News as well. They will keep playing the same stupid stories all day long. No excuse not to cover the no confidence vote, right? This isn't like American media where they're always moving on to another story because there's a lot of news in America and they're privately funded news networks and they actually have to deliver you content, regardless if you believe in, you like the station or not. CNN, Fox, MSNBC do a far better job than any legacy media outlet. And Michelle Ferreri and other conservative MPs rightfully then took a victory lap after CTV News had fired these two employees because it was a complete admission of guilt that yes, CTV was acting improperly. And now we suddenly have the same people saying, well, conservatives are just can't handle neutral, unbiased coverage. And saying, well, this might have not been the best way of editing this clip, but it's paranoid and delusional to think that this is actually CTV News coming after them and trying to make Polyev look bad by implying that he wants an election over social programs, not over the carbon tax, like he keeps saying every single day. And now it's that, well, it's only two employees. You can't blame all of CTV because of two employees, even though a lot of these people in the same breath will say the entire CBC, like the CPC, the Conservative Party of Canada, is attacking journalists and being corrupt, even though supposedly you're only supposed to blame the two individuals who are actually at fault. You can't blame all of CTV, but you can blame all of the CPC for going after CTV for doing something wrong. And so now we have people like fake conservatives like Andrew Coyne coming out to attack the conservatives for standing up for good coverage. Andrew Coyne here says, Pure Polyev will restore journalistic ethics and integrity. Really? Tell us more. How will he do that? Andrew, it just happened. That's an example of actually restoring journalistic ethics and integrity. Another great move will be doing things like defunding the CBC, who you work for and you don't want the money taken away from because they pay you to give absolutely pedantic, stupid opinions on television all day. And you get to write articles that are like 3,000 words about something that everyone forgot about 2 weeks ago. Regardless, though, this is restoring integrity, calling out bad journalistic questions, calling out bad edits, calling out media organizations for not giving a fair shake to your political party is absolutely in line with standing up for integrity in the media. But Andrew Coyne thinks that we should live in a world where journalists never get questioned. Journalists can say and do whatever they want, and because they have a little lanyard around their neck saying, I work for a crappy news organization, that means they are owed just absolutely like poured out respect. We should just act like they're gods. This is why Andrew Coyne liked Aaron O'Toole as the Conservative Party leader. Aaron O'Toole's first move in any situation where something controversial comes up is to capitulate. So every time a journalist stuck a microphone in the face and said, you're a bad person, Aaron, what do you say about that? Aaron O'Toole would be like, I'm sorry for being a bad person. I'm going to flail myself when I get home with a whip because I can't believe I even dared to even be part of the Conservative Party in front of a journalist. He was not conservative, but Andrew Coyne liked him because Andrew Coyne's not a conservative. Andrew Coyne is a conservative in the sense that he wants to conserve anything that's currently in government. If a government creates a new institution, Andrew Coyne will defend that institution. Andrew Coyne's the kind of guy that if he was in the Soviet Union in the 1990s, he would be very mad that the entire thing fell apart and they started getting rid of all the communistic institutions, because conservatives should be fighting to keep institutions because we've had them for a long time, don't you know, even though he will fight for institutions that were made 5 seconds ago and are obviously just big left-wing policy front groups. Regardless, jumping over to some other journalists here. Max Fawcett, how is it that the free speech folks are now calling for a columnist to be fired for exercising her right to free speech? And he's reacting to this woman who's slamming somebody, I believe, either from the CBC or the Toronto Star, for accusing the Conservatives of attacking journalism for calling out CTV. Obviously, this person doesn't have the power to fire whoever this, like Susan from CBC or Toronto Star. She's calling her out for being obviously just bad faith, just being a weasel. CTV gets caught doing something wrong, and now you have a bunch of journalists coming out of the woodwork saying, I can't believe Polyev's so mean. I can't believe he would attack somebody for attacking him. Goodness, disgusting. I can't believe when somebody walks up to Polyev and says, you're racist, defend yourself, that Polyev says, no, you're wrong, and you're being absolutely bad faith and disgusting. When somebody comes up to him and says, you're dog whistling to the far right, and he asks, give me an example, these fools legitimately think that that's somehow an attack on a journalist. As if, again, a journalist is just supposed to have the red cart rolled out in front of them. They walk up to you and say, when did you stop beating your wife? And you're like, yeah, that's a fair question, whoever your name is. beating your wife's bad, and if you're telling me that I'm doing that, I'm going to stop doing that. Stupid. Don't capitulate to these people. They have no ethics whatsoever. You get people like Bruce Arthur who still haven't deleted this post, and it says this. He's reacting to this guy. Says new stage in Canadian Tory-led Polyev versus BCE or whatever, and he's going after the fact that they were demanding that CTV News apologizes. And Bruce Arthur from the Toronto Star here says they're already effectively boycotting at least one very unfair and well-run CBC show, very fair and well-run CBC show, claiming it was malicious, speaks to either a paranoid worldview or just a cynical one. What a petulant bunch. Except they were right. Bruce, maybe you should delete your tweet because it proves that you're completely out of touch. You just assume that the Conservatives are wrong, and that's what he went along with. Other people here saying, that one's not even worth it, but other people basically saying the Conservatives are bad, and they're trying to now threaten the media by taking away their subsidies. Why do the media have subsidies in the first place? Now we have David Musgrove here again saying, the Conservatives will fight the press because it plays well with the base and raise money. Their machine feeds on enemies. Eventually the strategy fails, but it can work in the short run and do tremendous damage while it does. He said this after CTV News had to fire the journalists, had to fire the people for editing Polyev out of context. How is that bad to point out? I don't understand how these people can be so unself-aware. Basically, it's a tactic for the Conservatives to be right about something. If the Conservatives are right about something, that's just a bad faith tactic. I can't believe the Conservatives called out bad faith journalism. In fact, it's bad faith to call out people for being bad faith. I almost want to read over this entire post by Musgrove because it's so clownish what he writes here. I want to start because I have to go back to find the full thread. So you saw what he had said there. He's saying that eventually this strategy fails about calling out bad journalistic ethics from the media. And he moves on to say, CTV screwed up big time. But by CTV, I mean 2 people screwed up. Maybe a few more, not an entire organization. But the CPC will attack the organization and the media at large because most people won't bother to try and tell the difference. So in the same sentence or in the same post, he says, the CTV screwed up, but it was just 2 people. And then he moves on to saying, but the Conservative Party will attack the organization and the media at large. So he goes from just saying it's just these 2 people to saying it's the Conservative Party at large. He's not going to understand the irony of him making the statement, but I don't expect him to. He is effectively just... his journalistic skills don't extend far past just being snarky and sort of being condescending towards people he disagrees with. But he moves on. David Musgrove says, we're in an increasingly toxic, identitarian, polarized environment where norms are being eroded and we're moving from opponents to enemies. It's wildly unhealthy. It's damaging to our already damaged democratic institutions. It will get much worse before it gets any better. Incidentally, the most extreme version of this tactic deployed in the last century in the 30s and 40s by the fascist right, and the most recent version relied on by a MAGA extremist and Trump administration, share a common playbook. Let's not use it here. Okay, so David Musgrove, an idiot, let's just clarify, he is stupid, is saying that because the Conservative Party was right about the media manipulating story and actively editing Pierre Polyev out of context, because they called that out, that is an unfair strategy. And also that makes Pierre Polyev and the Conservatives not just like the MAGA right in the US, but makes them like Nazis and fascists who are apparently on the right, even though fascists are literally trade unionist socialists and Nazis are literally national socialists. In Nazi Germany, if you don't know, if you built like a typewriter, you would have to have an economic manager tell you exactly how much you were allowed to manufacture it for, how much steel you had to use, how much labor you had to use, how much you were allowed to sell it for, and ration you the amount of bolts and metal to create the product. They would have quotas for businesses. Before the war, they would make it so that you couldn't sell a pig for a certain amount of money, and so farmers would have to come up with scams where they would like sell you 10 pigs and a dog because dogs weren't price fixed, and the dog would basically be the entire rest of the profit, and the dog would then just come home with the farmer who originally owned it. it was not a right-wing government. It was left-wing. World War II, at least on the Eastern Front, was basically a war about two left-wing socialist systems fighting each other over extremely small differences in worldview and on basically their view of the role of the government. They were totalitarian regimes. You can't be totalitarian and also be capitalistic like these people will contradictory claim. Yes, Hitler was somehow a big capitalist, even though he was anti-Semitic and believed that capitalism was Jewish. Yes, but somehow he's a big free market guy, even though one of his first acts in government was getting rid of private property from the Weimar Republic's constitution, as well as banning profit from the railway system. That's something that actually happened. But whatever. Moving on. That's my little mini rant on National Socialism is in fact real socialism. Socialism is just the government runs the economy or the public runs the economy. Many different flavors of that outside of just flat out pure communism. Regardless. So it's now just you're a fascist for actually standing up for the truth. I don't think it's a good thing for society for the left to constantly try and associate truth with fascism. I hate fascism. I hate Nazis just as much as I hate communists. Not a good play for us to start saying that you might be far right for actually having integrity. That's crazy. It's stupid. But all these people don't have an ounce of integrity themselves. And this is just a sampling of the posts. And again, we had the timeline go, it's not happening. CTV News didn't manipulate the footage. And then saying, well, it's a little bit off, but it's probably not malicious, to CTV News admitting it's malicious, and then the same idiots in the media say, well, that's what the conservatives are attacking CTV News. They're attacking the media. They're trying to chop down our institutions from the very foundations. Nobody likes you guys for this exact reason. You guys suck at your jobs. Anyways, if you guys want to fund this show, go to the Give, Send, Go link in the description below or pinned at the top of the comments. We have a Chinese billionaire suing us for defamation, and in almost 3 years has not even provided a single shred of evidence that we defamed him. In fact, when we mentioned him in an article about who was fundraising or who was funding Aaron O'Toole's 2020 leadership campaign, when we mentioned this guy, we just linked to a Globe and Mail article that was a long investigative piece about him. The only thing that we said new about him was the fact that he was donating to Aaron O'Toole, and then we just linked a Robert Fife and Stephen Chase article that was all of his connections to the Chinese government. I didn't say anything. We didn't say anything new about the guy, nor was it even defamatory in any way, shape, or form. Anyways, so if you want to help us out with that, it's cost me more than $32,000, $33,000 fighting this thing. Every dollar helps. Hopefully you don't mind these videos when I kind of go a little bit ranty towards the end and pull up a bunch of random topics. But regardless, I at least got this video. It took me forever to make this one. I was trying to, put it in the correct order. And yesterday I absolutely had just an aneurysm trying to get the first 2-3 minutes coherent. And I'm like, okay, I'm leaving. I'm going to go door knocking, blow off some steam, talk to some voters in BC. And I'll try and maybe do this tonight or the next day. And it ended up being the next day. Also, I do need a haircut at some point. I'm starting to look very George Washington-ish when my hair is in a certain thing. So I have those kind of two wings on the sides. And then this is coming up too much. Ugh, horrible. I apologize. I will have a better haircut later.